Ecstasy spy, ecstasy spy. I'm paid by the government, baby, to keep the dream alive.
How are things in northern London these days? What's the scene like?
Well, with sort of coronavirus, things are a bit quiet.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, but I mean, we're kind of. It seems like we're kind of coming out of that a little bit right now, and we're I mean, it's okay. I mean, it feels some sort of like form of life is coming back.
Right. Yeah.
So it feels good. We've got, we seem to be because we have an NHS.
Yeah.
That when it works, well, it is a good thing, and so the vaccine's been very quick.
For you as a musician, what is that like? How has it been for you?
Well, we had a tour. I made an album with Peter Buck from REM.
Right.
Last year, we had a tour booked, a sold-out tour booked in the UK that got cancelled. Then it got cancelled again. It's now booked in for September this year. Whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know. Whether we're going to be that ahead at that point.
Yeah.
No one knows. No one's got a clue. Other than that, I've been really busy because I just made. So I've recorded a new album, which is the one that's out next month.
Right.
I've done loads of stuff. I wrote a kind of radio play. I've got an art exhibition.
I was going to say, don't you have an art exhibition that's happening?
Yeah, that's in July. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about your art before we get to the record.
Well, I did. A few years ago, I did a kind of concept album about wrestling.
Right. As you do.
Psychedelic wrestling album. It was put in the 1970s and 1980s wrestlers into psychedelic situations. Okay. Which I thought, that kind of worked for me. It was fairly, when you think about it, it's actually a fairly straightforward idea.
Yeah.
It's not, you think concept albums, I mean, something like Ziggy Stardust is a harder idea to get your head around than putting 70s wrestlers into psychedelic situations, I think.
Chances are some of them are probably under some psychedelic situations anyway.
Well, I think they are. It is pretty, the whole thing is pretty psychedelic, really, when you look back and all that stuff. So anyway, the art exhibition sort of ties in with that because I did some small paintings for that album, and I've just done a whole series of kind of bigger canvases. You can see one behind me, actually. That's Dickie Davis, who's the guy with the moustache. I'll go this way.
Yep. No, there he is. Yeah.
Who's sitting over my Hammond organ and an old drum machine. But this is my kind of part studio room as well, where I record.
So is that a Hammond with like the Leslie speakers and the whole bit?
It's actually a Korg Hammond. It's not not a real Hammond. I haven't got.
Okay, all right.
I mean, sometimes I get to use them in studios. So yeah, that's what the exhibition's about, really. So it's going to be about 10 large canvases, and it's up in the north. So that'd be good.
Cool. So is there anything is there a correlation between your art and your music?
Yeah, generally. I mean, the album I made with Peter Buck was kind of brought about by the art thing, because I did a series of paintings of Lou Reed,
right?
Called New York in the 70s. They're all the same, but they were different, but ostensibly all the same. And I was just selling them on the internet, and Peter Buck, who I didn't know before, got in contact with me and wanted to buy one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that's how we.
That was one of my questions I was going to ask: is how did you hook up with Peter Buck? So there you go.
That's how. Yeah. We then ended up making a record together. We just started exchanging emails, and I knew he liked my stuff from the 90s, the Auteurs and stuff like that.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, that's really how that happened. Yeah.
And who's on your coffee cup or teacup?
That's Lord Lucan. Are you aware of Lord Lucan?
No.
Okay, he was a lord. He was a member of the aristocracy that disappeared in 1974 after murdering the nanny who looked after his children. Yeah, so it's a famous. I mean, he's obviously dead by now. Otherwise, he'd be about 110.
Right, kind of like the B.B. Cooper of England or something. He's just like disappeared.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah. I only realized. I only heard about that a few months ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of a bit like that. But he was Lord Lucan was a bad man.
Very. Now, speaking of one last thing about the art, I think I read somewhere where one of the things you have is like a Christmas tree with baubles with members of the Fall on it.
Yeah. That's the sort of centre point.
Oh, really?
The exhibition, I forgot to say. So it's there's been about 50 members of the Fall.
Right.
Some of yeah, it is surprising. Some of whom are
broke a chair.
yeah. So, my God, I fell off my chair. It was so interesting. Some of whom were sort of were kind of only in the Fall from a number of weeks or even days.
Yes, I can understand that might be the case.
Because you end up painting invariably someone called Dave from Rochdale, who's just a sort of who's a steel welder or something like that, but was in the Fall for a couple of days. So so the Christmas tree is it's in my living room right now, so I can't bring it in. But
fair enough.
It sits up all. We celebrate Christmas every day here because I have a full Christmas tree, so fully lit.
I love it. Now the album that's coming out is called "Setting the Dogs on the Post-Punk Postman."
It is.
It is. So that's an interesting concept. Something to call an album. What can you tell me about that?
It's a series of kind of nightmares, I suppose.
Right.
The whole album, and that was. That seemed to be. It seems to say quite a lot without revealing too much of where my head's at.
I think it gets a point across. I'm just not sure what the point is.
Well, me neither. But that's very much the nature of art, isn't it? We don't actually have to kind of. Art is good because it's there to not necessarily be understood all the time.
Right.
You just float out ideas, and they might have some resonance later on, rather than just you and I having a conversation where there's a linear kind of clarity.
Hopefully.
maybe. Now you mentioned it, but with art, you can just it's like Noel Coward said that thing about the simple songs, didn't he, or something? I can't remember the exact quote, but nothing says quite so much as a sort of like stupid song,
right?
Really.
Yeah.
These are things that exist for us when we don't have words.
Right. So when was most of the album written and recorded?
During what we call lockdown.
Okay. Yeah, we do indeed call it that.
yeah. But I didn't. It's not really. There's not really much about. I wanted to avoid making an album that said things about lockdown.
Yes.
I think we've had so much stuff about it. I don't even like talking about it now, but we're in it. So
right. Yeah.
I think we're all going to be. So I don't think that people want a load of kind of artworks about lockdown and COVID to be sort of like that. We've got this sort of like pile of COVID obsessed art that we have to kind of wade through for the next 50 years.
Well, I think it's going to happen, but yeah.
It is, yeah. And maybe some of it will be good, but I suspect a lot of it won't be.
Well, that's very possible. But so like the opening track on the album, Ecstasy Spy, and I saw the video of it, and you had there's a Madonna poster in the background. I was actually hoping I would see that behind you instead of your
I've got that Madonna poster out. The poster's up there. Yeah, a video with the minimal amount of props.
Right.
It
looks like a great gig because the Beastie Boys and Run DMC were on the bill.
Yeah, it's a good gig. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No.
I'd have gone to that. But yeah.
So tell me about the song, though.
There's a poster on the wall of Madonna wearing a vest. Holidays in the kitty on. Get into the groove. When you defect, you gotta keep on the move. Ecstasy spy, ecstasy spy. I'm paid by the state to keep the dream alive.
The song is was sort of based upon the idea of about 2 years ago. There was a kind of famous case in this country in a town called Salisbury of an ex-Russian spy getting poisoned. It tends to happen quite a lot, and then obviously the KGB kind of denying anything to do with it, which maybe, you know, it's never been proven that they did. And it was sort of that was the jumping off point. It's kind of about our own, I guess it's kind of our own sort of obsessions with you know, freedom of speech and all that kind of thing, which seems kind of an odd, it always seems kind of quite odd in the sort of in the West, that we're kind of obsessed with this, that, you know, it always seems to be middle-aged men who seem to think that their right to speak has been taken away from them. I don't really see it happening, you know.
and Peter Buck is on that track, is that right?
He is, yeah. Because it was a late comer for the album we did together, and I just kind of thought, actually, I'm going to hold on to this one and just keep it to open my own album with. Always good to have a place to start off with, you see. Yeah.
So were you working alone making this record? Were you working with people? Were you in a studio?
Yeah.
Or were you working on a home?
I worked in my own home studio with all my stuff, like the messiest studio in the world, where just like leads and microphones, broken headphones, all the stuff you have when you work at home. The drummer, because he couldn't come here, sent me all his stuff. It's like the same way that we kind of worked weirdly on the Peter Buck album, because they were in America.
Right.
And that was before we were in travel kind of restrictions. That was just, we just did that because it was the convenient way. So it's it's a weird kind of world of working remotely, you know.
Yeah.
Which I wonder, you know, it makes you also kind of think about.
So this collaboration with Peter Buck, what is it that you each see in each other, do you think, that makes it work?
Well, I mean, he doesn't. I mean, the very simple thing around there is that he kind of comes up with very kind of solid song structures. You can hear that in REM.
Right.
It's all about kind of what goes on underneath the track. He's really good on that.
Right.
And I can then weave my own sort of like my kind of fantasies around that. And that seems to work. And because we've both been, you know, making music quite a long time, that we're not that precious about it. So, you know, we just fling ideas, and it's like everything seems to be like, yeah, great, let's just do that, and we can kind of go without any constraints,
right,
towards commerciality, because obviously he doesn't need to be commercial at all. I can't be. It works out really well. So I think I can help him with his quest to be less commercial.
Right. Well, there you go.
So I think he certainly doesn't
something to strive for, I guess.
Yeah, I think he certainly doesn't ever want to be in a band sort of as big as REM again. So I can help him.
Right. Gotcha. That's good.
I think he wouldn't. I don't think he'd want to play stadiums again. So that's going to be okay.
Well, that makes sense, because I am old enough to remember REM playing in small clubs and stuff, and they were a great live band back then. You know.
Of course. Yeah.
And they just seemed to like play whatever they wanted to off the top of their heads. They were doing covers and doing originals.
An amazing band. And I was even watching some of the other night. I was watching a bit of one of their stadium shows where they're doing Man on the Moon, and it's actually kind of at their most sort of commercial peak. It's kind of it's kind of phenomenal.
Yep.
That they could do that, and it's sort of kind of the whole thing's quite shamanic, really.
Yeah. Now you were starting to talk to me a little bit. You mentioned the word psychedelic, and there's a character in one of your songs called Psychedelic Derek. In this tune called "Never Going Back to Liverpool." What do you have a bad relationship with Liverpool?
Not bad. I just wrote that sort of a kind of funny sort of love song to Liverpool.
Right.
If you like, it was about Liverpool's one of the weirdest places for me to play. That I never really get much of an audience there. You know, do okay most places, but given that Liverpool is almost sort of like the other capital of British music, I always thought, when I sort of first went there in the early 90s, I thought it'd be a breeze going to Liverpool, but no, Liverpool not having me at all. So I wrote this. This song about sort of pretending to kind of have a tantrum that I'm never going to go back there until I'm truly appreciated, which is cool. It's of course it's bent with a lot of affection, and and almost a kind of like a kind of, I wouldn't use the word pastiche, but it's along the lines of those sort of things like the Bangles never going going down to Liverpool,
right?
All that kind of every band in Liverpool is psychedelic. It just seems to be, you're not allowed to be in a band in Liverpool unless you have to be a psychedelic band. There's just thousands and thousands of psychedelic bands all come from Liverpool. It's great. It's a good thing.
Well, speaking of psychedelic, the following song is called "When I Own the Scarecrow." Reminded me a bit, maybe I'm wrong, but of a Syd Barrett era Pink Floyd somewhere sitting in that song. Would that be fair assessment?
It's just a true. I mean, a lot of the songs are just true stories, really. I mean, it was about. I did own a scarecrow.
Okay.
Well, I bought a scarecrow, and I loved the scarecrow. And I put it in my backyard of a house I had, and it was great because it looked terrifying. It was a proper scarecrow.
Right.
And then when I moved, I took it with me, and it just sort of it disintegrated. And I was very sad. The song is better than the story.
Right.
The story is a bit of a non-anecdote. The story is essentially, the story is one line: "I once owned a scarecrow," which is the title of the song. So yeah.
That's great. And most of the songs are kind of about things or referencing to things, but then there's one, I just want to be, no, which one am I talking about here now? Oh yeah, I Just Want to Be Buried, which is kind of more kind of erotic, if I may say, or
yeah. Well, it's sort of like what's the word? A friend of mine had so near the knuckle it's halfway up the elbow.
I like that.
So I think what more needs to be said? It's pretty straightforward, It's it's kind of down to basics.
Yes. Very, and which is followed by Andrea Dworkin's Knees, kind of somewhat ironically, maybe, I don't know. Was when you put these songs together in order, were you thinking in terms of how one relates to the other?
No, it's more that a lot of them are more there sonically.
Right.
Them trying to tell, because I've done quite a few conceptual albums in the past, so I didn't feel the need to kind of have an overarching thing going on. But but the song about Andrea Dworkin is, I sort of I met her a couple of times.
What was that like?
Interesting. Just because she was someone who went to a swimming pool near me, and that was it. And I had a cup of tea with her once, really? And I didn't know anything about her really at the time. And so the song was just really about that, and it's about sort of like finding more out about this person that you sort of vaguely. There's another. I mean, the other song on there similarly is Ivor on the Bus, which was about sharing occasional bus journeys with Ivor Cutler, who used to be a kind of neighbour, not next door neighbour, but in the road, up the road, as it were.
Right.
I'd often find myself sitting on the C11 bus with Ivor Cutler, Mr. Cutler, as he liked to be called, and I didn't know him, but I would listen to conversations that he'd have, and the bit about there's a line in there about his hat, which is a real conversation he had with a schoolboy,
right,
who was complimenting him on his hat. It was quite strange because you thought like a teenage schoolboy in London would be a bit cheeky. This sort of old eccentric, and he wasn't really. He was just saying, "I really like your hat," and I remember Ivor saying, "It's a very dependable hat,"
Yeah, and did you ever try and strike up a conversation?
Kind of surprises you. It's kind of about being sort of surprised, I think, by people when school kids don't act to type, or people don't act to type, and they're just more, I don't know, politer or something, or more erudite than you would imagine.
Yeah. So did you ever try and strike up a conversation with him?
No,
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 no.
no. I didn't know. I didn't need to,
Right.
because I did about 3 bus rides with him, and I could hear the stuff going on. And I didn't really want to. And I was just logging it, and I wasn't really intending to ever write a song, but sometimes songs just come out years later, and obviously he's no longer with us. So
Yeah.
but it's kind of more, and I suppose it's also about the people who kind of used to live around here. He used to get in North London, the kind of like the eccentrics, who I suppose they're not so welcomed anymore in this country. It's the genuine kind of interesting people, I feel, have been, kind of shut down a bit, or maybe they're just dying out.
Maybe. Do you think there's a reason why those kind of people are not kind of embraced these days?
Well, yeah, I mean, but Britain's always a very sort of it's always been a very socially conservative country anyway.
Right.
Not that should really affect those things, because those people, I think, often don't sort of fit on any kind of political side anyway.
Right.
But no, I think there's just a sort of I think maybe with we kind of, as we kind of go into ourselves, so with social media and again things like COVID, which is almost like you could almost say this is a kind of, if you want to get biblical about it, which I wouldn't recommend, but if you wanted
it's bound to happen.
Say this is kind of what happens. This is what happens because we've kind of shut ourselves into like a world of social media, and now we really can't go out in the world. This is how. So you want to be inside on your screen all day? Here you go.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. I don't know.
Kind of be careful what you wish for, I guess.
Maybe, yeah, perhaps, yeah.
Yeah. And do you pay much attention to the other stuff that's going on around the world? I mean, it just seems like it's been a pretty crazy year in general. So even with COVID is just one of the main driving forces. I mean, you got your, Suez Canal is suddenly blocked by this giant boat. I mean,
yeah, it's unblocked. Apparently it's unblocked now.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's on the news. I saw that on the news this morning. Yeah, it's unblocked. It's all okay again. So they've taken the cork out of the Suez Canal. It's all right.
Oh, well, that's a relief.
Yeah.
Man, I wonder how much stuff is backed up behind there. It's got to be insane.
Well, there's a lot. We're all going to be living off. The agrarian revolution is probably coming to us, whether we like it or not.
Right.
Our own sort of vegetable patches.
Yep.
With our own scarecrows. I should have taken more care of that scarecrow.
There you go. You're onto it. So what are you working on next?
Next one is we're a good way into the next Peter Buck album.
Right.
Which we've got about. I know people always say, "Oh, we've got this amount of songs," but we actually have got about 15 songs. So the question is whether we that are all kind of. We need to get the drums on them. Our drummer Linda is still in lockdown in America, so we're waiting for her to kind of get out and be able to get to a studio to record the drums.
Right.
Once that happens, then it's ready to mix. But at the moment, we're kind of pushing ahead and saying, we're both saying, let's make this a double album. Let's do a proper double album, like 2 records, 2 record set. 6 or 7 songs on each side. Let's just do a really big thing.
A big thing.
It won't fit on 1 CD. It has to fit on 2 CDs, because I've never done a proper double. I don't know if Peter has either. I don't know. I don't think he has. So that would be that would be cool. Yeah.
So do you think in terms of CDs?
No, I really think in terms of records.
And LPs, yeah.
Yeah, LPs, yeah, because that's what I was brought up on. I don't mind CDs. I think they're all right. And it was when CDs first came out, they were great, because when you'd make a record in the 80s, in the late 80s, when I started making records, you'd make a record, and when it would get mastered, you'd be very excited. Yeah. It sounded like great in the mastering room. Then when you get your kind of test pressing back, it would sound like it was like, recorded through an old sock or something like that. So CDs were great because the CDs actually came back and sounded how they were meant to sound in the studio.
Oh,
So they were good. I'm not a kind of down on CDs person. I don't like MP3s and iTunes and Spotify stuff. I can't. It's not because I don't accept the formula, but I can hear sonically that it's not right, and there's too much compression. It's just too compacted. It sounds bad to me.
Well, there you go. And so, how will the songs on this Peter Buck album that you're calling compare to what is coming out on Setting on the Dogs on the post-punk Postman? It just rolls off the tongue.
We're pushing to further kind of nightmarish landscapes. It's all like everything at the moment. As I said, there's nothing directly about pandemics on there, but it's pushing us into a sort of kind of fever dream. So it's a kind of, I think it's like everything sounds like really fever dreamish and really kind of amplified. I mean, it's good. It's fun. It's good fun. It's a good fun record, but it's a good fun rock and roll album. But it's also full of apocalyptic visions.
Excellent. I look forward to it. I need a good apocalyptic vision every now and then, especially down here in New Zealand. We don't get a lot of that. It's all green and
count your blessings.
Yeah, really, definitely. Well, thank you very much for taking time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. So the album's out at the end of April, right?
It is at the end of April. Yeah.
So we got to wait a little bit, but it'll be worth the wait.
I hope so. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marty.
Good to see you.
All right. Have a good day. Have a good evening. Have a good night.
Thank you. You have a good day.